Hello and welcome. So glad that you have joined in with us as we continue our desires here with Michael Ray and myself to look at what how we can be better really in being Christians at work. So we have been kind of all over the place for the last little bit, small sabbatical to deal with some things, and then back last week. But so far, we've gone, for all of you that have been through this long, winding road with us, we've been through the org chart. When we've talked about some, more specific things, whether it be HR issues or as last week we talked about how do you work on that balance of forgiveness in the workplace versus accountability. And this morning, our intention is to look at the idea of, as all of us are within the workplace, how do you keep in balance the ideas of both ambition and contentment? How do we, kind of muddle through wanting a desire to climb that corporate ladder as fast as we can versus being content with the blessings and things we have of God? So we're going to try to parse through that this morning in 30-ish minutes, as much as Michael and I are ever any good at keeping time here. But that's the plan for today. So hopefully you're along for the ride. Mr. Ray, how's everything in beautiful Somerset?
We are very blessed, my friend. And it just struck me that you always do the intro. Is that this? You're the alpha? Is that what that means?
I think it's because you're doing the mechanics on the backside.
Don't let people see behind the curtain how slickly produced our show is.
All production concerns can be sent to Michael.Ray.
I am. This topic is like um, when I think about the natural conflicts that the Christian runs into in business. This is the one. This is the one that I come back to constantly, and I think you'll find that I don't have a lot of answers here. This is one that is a wrestling match for me, because the I'll kind of lay the table before you, Mike. The way I think about it or see it is the world. Yeah, you go to pick a random Fortune 500 company and look at their annual report, and one word that you will never see in a positive context is content. They are, I mean, it would be anathema for a CEO to stand up and say, "Hey, we're just really happy with what we're doing. We're content with where we are. We've been really blessed, and we're just going to try to, hold the line." If you ever find the word content in any of that kind of setting, is we are never content. We're never going to be content with where we are. We're always going to be one doing more. We can never satisfied. I mean, that's a mantra. That's just accepted as a maxim in business. We're never satisfied. And then you contrast that with the contentment that Jesus promises and offers. And you've got this very apparent and natural point of conflict. And so, we all, those of us that are in the secular world, we exist in the business community, and we are immersed and engrossed in this ambitious, this this world of ambition, and there are parts of it that are okay. But then we also, Christianity tells us to be content, and then so how do you square that circle? So that is what I intend to learn from you this morning.
So, listeners, if you have heard the cues there, this is going to be another one of those things where Michael and I talk about a lot of things and don't really tell you anything, which, happens here. It's funny, as you were saying that, the other places that I've seen contentment is in regular resignation letters. We have become content, we have become complacent, and therefore, the board's decided to throw me out with the trash.
Yes.
And we think about, statements with Peter, from Peter, first or second Peter, I'm grasping at it right now, but godliness plus contentment is great gain. And we think about how, and to, for those of you that haven't dialed up the series at South Side over the last couple of weeks on being peacemakers, and not being content is one of the things that just steals your peace, right? You can't have peace if you're never content. So how do we get there? Here's the other side of the coin, though. I think sometimes when we get into, biblical studies, and we try to look at this from a biblical standpoint, I think we also falsely, in my judgment, say that, contentment's the only answer, that it's just contentment. But I don't think Abraham, Peter, Joseph, any of these characters we want to list got wealthy, like the scriptures talk about being wealthy, resting on their laurels. That they continued to improve, they continued to get better, they continued to do more, and God blessed them. Those blessings, make no mistake about it, those blessings came from God. And I think as we grow, both spiritually and we grow in the workplace, that we have to recognize where those blessings come from. But I don't know that a Christian really truly should be content with their spiritual state either. I mean, are you okay being, Joe C average Christian, or do we all want to strive to get better spiritually? So I think, like with most things that we find when we study the scriptures, is there's a balance. And my intent this morning as we talk through these things is to try to strike the chord of balance, that I think we can be content to the point of laziness or inactivity, and I think we can be overly ambitious to the point of greed and pride, and somewhere in the middle is, in my judgment, is where the answer is.
Yeah, a couple of things to follow up on that. One, to your point, if Joseph would have been content, most of Egypt would have died, and he wasn't content. I mean, he was clearly very ambitious toward his goal, and that goal was, prepare for 7 years of famine, and so that matters. But also I think it speaks to maybe a misunderstanding of what contentment really is. And I think you've even referenced where there is a confluence, at least in our minds, or in a lot of minds, between contentment and complacency. And I'm not; those are not synonymous terms. They perhaps we've conflated them, and that's probably to our detriment if we have. That if we think that is what we're trying to achieve in contentment, and maybe that's a place to start. So I'll take the reins here for just a second. If you want to talk about contentment from a biblical perspective, you're very likely one of the places you're going to end up is Philippians. And so in Philippians chapter 3, Paul talks about contentment, and he uses a word I think is really interesting. So there's a contentment math that I think is true, and that is everything plus God equals nothing. And so it doesn't, that's not where you get, that's kind of what Philippians 3 is all about. Everything plus God equals nothing. God plus something equals nothing. And I think that's where we kind of get to in our Christianity, is that we want God, but then we need this other thing. We need business success or material things or whatever. If I could just have God plus that, I could be content. And what Paul goes out of his way to tell us in Philippians is that contentment means not needing anything else. That there is a specific word, and I'm going to try to find the verse. I should have been more prepared here, Mike. I'm in.
You think in 4?
Yeah, Philippians chapter 3. Let's see. Let's see. This is great. This is a great podcast right here. I'm thinking about the passage where he says, "I don't consider it made of my own, but this is what I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining to what lies ahead. I press on for the goal of the prize of the upward call in Christ Jesus." And then, maybe where is the verse I'm looking for? Where he talks about contentment. The Greek word there, as he talks about contentment, is autarkis, which is like an autarky, which is a kind of a political word for a country that doesn't take in any resources from the outside. It doesn't require anything external in order to provide for itself. All of the resources that it needs are created internally. politically, economically, I can tell you that that's probably not a political philosophy that makes a lot of sense. But spiritually, Paul used that specific word to talk about his contentment in Christ, that it didn't require anything from the outside. And so that the contentment, as I believe Paul helps us understand or helps us define there, is that it doesn't mean that we are lazy, or it doesn't mean that we're complacent. It just means that we understand that God is all we need to be satisfied. That God is all we need to be um, uh, at peace and mentally and spiritually content. That as long as in our mindset, boy, if I only X, that just speaks to a discontent. It speaks to a thinking that it's going to have to be God plus something in order to satisfy us. And as long as it's God plus something, then we're inherently empty. I even think about the way a lot of us have talked over the past year, where we say things like, "Man, I'll just be happy when things get back to normal."
Hmm.
That speaks to, and I know maybe we perhaps don't mean it this way, but it does speak to a discontent. Like, I will need things to be normal in order to be spiritually, mentally, emotionally content or satisfied. And if things never go back to normal, if this is the world we're in for the next 40 years, are we going to be able to be spiritually content? Or are we always going to be like the Israelites wandering through the wilderness? Man, if we could just go back to Egypt, the
Right.
leeks and the garlic were fantastic. Why can't we go back? Why can't we go back to Egypt, the way things were, and not be content with where we are? Because I can go back to the fall of 2019, and it wasn't like we were all swimming in contentment then.
Right.
Things weren't. I can go back to y'all's Facebook pages. It wasn't Shangri La back then. So to say that, man, I'll be happy or I'll be content when things get back to normal, it's a fallacy. It's something that Satan puts in our heads, that there is always going to be something between us and contentment. And in the same way, we say, man, if I could just get that promotion, if I could just land that customer, if I could just achieve this thing, if I could get that job, then that would put me in a position where I could be content. As long as we've got a barrier between us and contentment, that I think Paul uses that word on purpose to talk about that. That is the thing. As long as it's got to be God plus something, that's where we fail.
Yeah, and I'll keep going there. Kind of the next chapter, right? When we get into Philippians 4, really starting in 10, and Paul's addressing here the need, them wanting to help him, right? Remember, Paul's in prison. We did this early on when we went through Philippians together. But starting in 10, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have received your concern, you've revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content.
That's the verse I
I
was looking
know
for.
how
Thank you.
I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So probably one of the most terribly used verses in all the Bible is Philippians 4:13. But the important part here that I think we miss when we read this, right? We read this, and I think, in my mind anyway, people want to jump to 13, right? 13's the great part. Maybe we concentrate a little bit back in 10 and 11 and say how great it was for the Philippians to care about Paul when he was in prison. But you miss the most important thing Paul says: for I have learned in whatever situation I'm in. And so, and I think this is the crux of what we're driving at today, is that Paul said in abundance, when I'm killing it, I had to learn to be content.
Maybe
When
most
I had,
difficult. Maybe most
right,
difficult, by the way.
maybe, when I was absolutely had nothing, was starving, I learned to be content. So I don't think this contentment is an innate nature. I think it's learned behavior, but it's learned based on how he wraps this up. So I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me is not about whether or not you can dunk a basketball or, score the game winning touchdown. Like, that's nonsense. What he's saying is contentment is what we need strength for. I can do all things, meaning I can be content in abundance, or I can be content broke, as long as I have Christ to strengthen me. That's the whole point that Paul's driving at here. And I think that that's it for us too, is that we've got to find the way that our self-fulfillment, our actualization, our validation really all comes from God, and not from my own accomplishments, or not from my job title. I mean, think about some of the foolish things that, we say to one another about this. Like, if I, if I can be middle management, or if I can just get the VP title, or if I can just, some of this just nonsense, that's when I'm finally going to be content. When in reality, we've traded, bark for, eternal joy, right? It's just, it's a misunderstanding of what God really intends for us.
The to your point, that Philippians 4:13 is used. I can ace this test. I can do these things above my normal capacity, because God gives me the ability to do that. And Philippians 4:13 is kind of like a little spiritual talisman that we use to validate that. In reality, as you said, Paul is saying the things that we can do through Christ who strengthen us is uh, to be poor, to be beaten down, to handle adversity. Those are the things that we can do and maintain contentment. So yeah, so that's part of this equation, understanding what contentment is, and knowing that it's not achieving, it's not finally achieving our goals. It's not, nor is it saying this is all that I ever want to have or ever want to do, and wanting more than this is a sinful desire. And so that's the contentment part. So what about the ambition part? And what passages would we go to talk about, can that be a spiritual mindset?
So you keyed me up perfectly, because I'm going to, Luke 12 here, for you to help me make this parable make sense. Because Luke 12, the was it the foolish builder, or whatever is the title of that parable? Oh, let me flip over there. I forget exactly what it's called. You've got the rich fool, right? It starts off in that section, someone in the crowd, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus says that doesn't make any sense. I'm not a judge or arbitrator. Guard against covetousness, for life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then tells them the parable, right? We all, I think, remember the parable. A guy had a great crop, said, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns, and build larger ones, and there I'll store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up for himself treasure and is not rich towards God. So, Michael, doesn't that very clearly say that we should never build bigger barns? I mean,
Well,
that seems very simple to me, right?
I will tell you that as someone who just went through a pretty massive construction project at his workplace, this verse gave me pause more than a time or two over the past couple of years, and so trying to make sure that the mindset or the attitude of the rich fool in Luke 12 was not one that we were taking into a building project, was something that's close to my heart. I'm sincerely struggle with that. And so, I mean, the layup answer, the kind of the 100 level class is, that wasn't the rich fool's issue, because you read verse 21, that his issue wasn't that he built bigger barns, but that he was not rich toward God. So that's And that's correct. The 100 answer is correct. That's the answer that's the reason that he had the issue. I think the graduate level class would be, so what is the attitude of building bigger barns that maintains richness toward God? And so that, I think that's what, and maybe that's the core of the question is, can you have that ambition and maintain that contentment or that relationship?
I think some of our viewers may be concerned that they thought this was a 100 level class.
From everything I've heard,
What do you mean graduate level?
Up to this point, this has been pretty remedial.
But in all fairness, I think that's exactly right. It's how do you do that? How do you because I think we're intellectually and spiritually dishonest if we say that there's not, folks that have been very successful and very wealthy, and God's been not only okay with it, but 100% behind it. So, you can't not grow and not, continue to succeed and continue with these blessings of God, and say they're from God, and yet say, well, it's wrong to do any growth. Because quite honestly, let's go back to what we started early on with. Didn't Joseph build 7 bigger barns? Like, what wasn't that the whole point of the dream, is that we're going to take 1/7 of this grain and we're going to store it over the next years. So not only can we provide for Egypt, but then they ended up providing for everybody in the area as they came. So the interpretation of the dream from God was build bigger barns and be smart with these richness of blessings that you have. So I think, and also going back to our lessons we started this on with stewardship, it's being a good steward doing this. Now, the fear, the trap, the concern, the worry for me is, at what point, am I losing focus of why I'm doing this? So as we find, I think, in scripture, and one of the hardest things for all of us to really get our mind around, because it's not, it's not so black and white and you can't really prove it, is intent. I'm more and more convinced in my life that our intent, what we desire to do, why, if you will, is even more important than the what. So if we get our whys out of whack, that's where we get into trouble, like this guy in Luke chapter 12. But if our why is right, if we are, not only enjoying the blessings of God, but using it as First Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians, I'm blanking on that right now, but that we no longer steal or no longer be lazy, but work, and the second part of that verse that's important, so that we can provide for our families and have enough to share with others. I think we forget that part. Well, I got to work, and I got to work 80 hours a week to provide for my family. Not if you're spending all of it, because the scriptures clearly say that God is a God of abundance, and he will give you enough not only to provide for you, but to share with those that can't have what you have. So, when we get into the building bigger barns mindset, when we get into that growth mode, it has to be with the intent that it's not for our own benefit solely, but that we may benefit others, that we may share these blessings of God with others.
I think also about what John the Baptist told some of the Roman soldiers. It's recorded for us that one of the messages, he was pretty blunt and pithy with some of his statements, but he said, "Be content with your wages." And so I think about that too. That was one of the core messages that he took to them, is their discontent. So it's not just necessarily with bigger barns, but it's also has to do with paycheck and salary, and he told them to be content with their wages. And that doesn't mean that we should never want to raise, right? And that, so it's the same. I bring that up to say I think it's the same issue, just on a smaller scale. Is it sinful to plan for bigger barns? Is it sinful to desire a bigger paycheck? I do believe that, obviously the intent, as you bring up, is critical, but I also believe that it is our spiritual contentment is our fulfillment, is our happiness, is our joy reliant
Mhm.
on achieving that? Is it that I'm going to be unsettled, I'm going to be unstable spiritually, I'm going to be unhappy, unfulfilled unless I have this thing? And that is where it gets to Philippians 4 issue, I think, is um, I cannot, not that I'm desiring to do more and to make more. Um, so to your point that I can be a funnel to those blessings to somebody else, not that I have that desire, but that I am, I'm going to be unhappy and unfulfilled until I get there.
Right.
Um, that is the inability to do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Um, so, and that, and that's one of those questions that I don't know that you can answer for me or I can answer for you. Is we got to be spiritually honest with ourselves and say, can I be content without this thing?
Right.
And if I can't, that's a pretty good stopping point, opportunity for reflection and study. So why can't I? Where is my fulfillment really, and where does my contentment, my fulfillment come from?
And I think that's part of the again, in my judgment, that's part of Paul's point there in Philippians 4 is that, you know, when you find yourself in those states, how do I still have joy, in the state of being without or with being of excess? Where am I deriving that from? And how do I, how do I appreciate where I'm at and what I can do? How do I, appreciate the fact that I'm here? And, you know, comparison, I think is one of the devils for us, right? Is that we tend to always look up and not look back, right? We look at the brand new house across the street that somebody built and not at the homeless guy downtown. Like if I just had his house, not that I need to be thankful because I'm not homeless. It's those pieces that we've got to get right in our mind of you know appreciating the blessings of God of where we stand and what can I do even in this state. And if I can understand that I can be fulfilled, I can be spiritual, I can be encouraging, I can be what I need to be spiritually regardless of what my station in life is. And when that station changes, I got to remember that too and figure out how to do it as things get better. And I think that's part of what led, right? If we're honest with our biblical history, that's what led several to take these vows of poverty, right? You had, pious people throughout centuries that said, if you had any money that you just, it was tearing at your soul, because I think it's a legit concern, right? If you don't learn the lessons along the way, you may end up with this idea that the only way I can really be content is to be broke. But I think that's, as we've said multiple times, that's disingenuous to the text because there were several that were wealthy and very content. Um, and I don't think, I guess, part of me, I don't see Abraham lying awake at night in the wagon wondering, what his next project is or how he's going to take over another corner of the world. He was wealthy and they prospered, but it seems like his goals were spiritual and not economical. But the economics kept coming, right? And the economics allowed him to do more things, allowed him to, raise armies and fight with Lot. So you've got, that building along the way. But we've got to get away from the fact that even in growth mode, that it's all consuming. Is that all I'm thinking about is what I have to do to get this promotion and at what cost? What am I giving up to force all of my effort and energy into that? And then that's back to our conversation here, a couple of months back on work-life balance, right? I think a lot of times in life, we find ourselves in these crunches where, if I just pour 80 hours into the company for the next couple of years, I'll get that promotion to management and then I'll be a deacon. And then I'll have time to work with the church. And then I'll teach a Bible class. But just right now I can't because I'm in this press where I've got this short period of time. I've got to get this thing done. Um, the hard thing for me in life that I've seen myself do, I'm not blasting anybody that's out there. I'm coming from my own place is, the more times you do that and the more times you put that stuff off, the easier and easier it is. And the more and more you begin to feel unqualified to do any of those things because you have so many more commitments that you've given yourself in the grand illusion of, I'm just going to do this for a few more years.
So last few minutes here, let me summarize by interrogating you a little bit. Uh, so, and feel free to reciprocate. Uh, in your work life, do you consider yourself ambitious?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would answer that question the same way. Do you consider yourself content?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I would say it in this way that, I'm happy with what I do, but it's not, the other thing is, and most of you that are listening to this know either Michael or I very well and know all the other stuff we do. So I'm convinced I'm not content because, the bank here is fabulous, which it is. I mean, I'm not knocking my bank, but, I get more contentment out of, the work we do with Sacred Selections. I get more contentment out of the work we do with the church, with the ability to preach and to teach Bible class and to do those things. So I guess it's more, and then it just to me, and I've jokingly said this for years that I do financial planning to support my preaching habit, and I think that's how I figured it out in my own mind. And I'm not saying that's what everybody has to do, but in my own mind, it's that I understand I go to work only so that I can do these other things. Like work is not my whole life, though I want to be the best at what I'm doing, but it's really just a means to an end for me. How would you say?
What's that?
I said, how would you answer the same convoluted mess?
This is about you right now. And so, last one. I think those are fabulous answers. So, where do you believe that your ambition, from a professional standpoint, where do you believe that it springs from? If all those things are true, if this is a tool to support your spiritual endeavors, where does the ambition in a professional sense, why does it exist if the professional growth or the economic growth is not your primary concern?
So, for me in the world that I'm in, it's a little different, because the better I am at what I do, I'm in a service role. I manage money for people. I plan for them. So the better I am at what I do, the better it is for them, right? So the more certifications, growth, more knowledge I have, all of those things just makes it better for the folks that I serve. So for me, I have a constant desire to be better because it's better for them. So I'm in a little strange world there, as far as what that ambition is. I'm not, my ambition's not to be the president of my bank. My ambition is to be the absolute best financial planner that I can be because it's good for them. And the more skills, abilities I bring to the table, the more resources I have, it makes it better for them. So, that for me is, it kind of, it melds in my world. I know that's not right for everybody, right? That doesn't directly translate to what you do. You may be just trying to climb the corporate ladder of management, but in my world, it's all, it's all cyclical to me too, right? Because the more people I touch, the more families I work with, the more opportunities we have to talk about not only what are you doing with your retirement account, but because those relationships get deep, we end up talking about their spiritual life too. And I had a roughly a 30-minute Bible study with a client the other day, because we just got into some things with his retirement planning, and we just Like, okay, well, let's stop, let's get out the Bible and let's kind of talk through some of these things. So there's cool things like that that I get to do, that's amazing. Uh, but it's all, to me, one feeds the other.
I think that what I because I struggle with this question, I end up asking questions like I just asked you to other people, and um, people that I trust and care about their answer. And I do think it's interesting that when you ask Christian-minded people what they're ambitious for, or why they're ambitious, or where does that come from? Nobody is. I don't think the Christian mindset is the arrogant. Well, it's just this internal drive that I have that I am. I don't. But it's mostly about I have the ability in different ways, and your way's unique. I have the ability in different ways to serve more people in a better way if I'm advancing, whatever that means. If my company's a little bigger, if I'm in a little higher position, if I manage a few more people, and I don't think that that's a story we tell ourselves about ourselves. I think that's pretty genuine. Is can I have a bigger impact in a company of 100 than I can in a company of 10? And I hope that's not a rationalization of economic greed and self-interest. But I do see that that thread among Christian people, that the ambition that I'm looking for is I can serve more people, be they customers or employees or coworkers or whatever. I can serve more people. That kind of strikes me as a healthy ambition. And that, as I try to practicalize, sure that's a word, as I try to make practical this idea of balancing ambition and contentment, that's kind of one of the things I come back to is I don't think either one of us would advocate for just an ambition for more stuff, just an ambition for bigger paycheck. Even if we try to rationalize that, well, I can give more away. I'm not sure that what are we really accomplishing, but that ambition to serve more seems to be a healthy way to approach it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the idea of influence. How can I influence more, serve more? And I think you and I've had these conversations about the bigger barns that you've recently built. But what it is too, it's job opportunities in the community, and based on the culture that you guys have, that's important. If you believe in it and you value it, you'd want more people as part of that culture, right? And that's going to be better in their lives. So all of those things, I think, kind of feed together too. So again,
I can't
intent.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many Christian people that they asked me what we were doing, and I said, we're just building bigger barns, and that makes people so uncomfortable.
So, Joseph's version of bigger barns, not Luke 12.
That tended to be how I started the conversation, just to just to kind of go ahead and put that out there. So, frankly, we're just building bigger barns, and so that caused but a lot of times it caused what I hope was a worthwhile conversation. Is our bigger barns in and of themselves a problem? And then back to the Luke 12 example, and it kind of made us check ourselves too, because because they can be, bigger barns can be a problem, and learning how to be content in times of abundance is part of Philippians 4 too. And so managing all that, making sure that if we've got God take the rest of it away or give us more of it, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And are we going to be content if it all gets stripped away?
Mhm.
That's kind of a soul searching. If if the boss comes in today and sends you home, or if it all comes crashing down, if we got God, are we going to be okay?
Right.
And not are we going to be skipping, or
Mhm.
but are we going to be okay, spiritually and emotionally? And those are anyway. Those keep me up at night.
Yeah, I think that's like most things, and we'll draw to a close because we're at time. But like most things here that you're going to find Michael and I say, and I don't know if it's because it's the right thing or it's just kind of how we work, is the struggle's the answer. If you're struggling with this stuff, then I think you're on the right track. We really believe that. That's how most of our conversations end when we're, trying to parse through something like, it's the struggle is what I think makes us better. If you ever stop struggling with it, if you ever, get to the point where, you don't care, you don't worry, you don't, you're not saying, hey, do I, what am I doing this for? What get back to that why? To me, I think that's where you're dangerous. But as long as you're having the conversations, and most importantly, you're 100% honest with yourself. I don't care what you tell somebody else, but when you look hard into that mirror and you're honest with yourself, I think you'll always end up at the right place.
Yeah, I heard somebody say something that I thought was pretty poignant over the last few days. That was, most people that they run into in life that say they're struggling with sin really aren't struggling with it at all. They've kind of succumbed to it. If we're genuinely struggling, Galatians 5 tells us the flesh is going to war against the spirit. So as
Mhm.
long as we're here, there should be a struggle.
Mhm.
Um, and that doesn't mean that we're giving in to sin consistently. That's not struggling. That's capitulation. that's
Right.
that's not a struggle. Um, but that verses like Galatians 5 that tell me that the flesh is going to war against the spirit, that there is going to be a struggle, that ambition and contentment should be a battle for us. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being with this continually coming up for me. I'm okay with not having that handled yet, or not, I don't know what the right phrase is. I'm okay with having to answer those questions internally for myself. I'm not saying I always get them right, but at least it's a dashboard indicator for me that if it keeps coming up, um, it hopefully it means that uh, we're still struggling, that we're still battling the issue, that we haven't capitulated, and so and I'll kind of leave my thoughts there, but enjoyed the conversation as always.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. Again, tune in with us next time. We're going to try our best to keep these back on a weekly format. And a little teaser preview. We're going to start moving to starting next week, Lord willing, uh, trying to examine some, business principles out of stories in scripture. So, what did Joseph do that we can use as successful business practices? What did Abraham do? What did Lydia do? So we're going to try to explore some of these Bible characters, what we have as a peek into their business, and how we can take those same business principles back. We think it's a cool idea. Hopefully, you all are along for the ride for that too. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for spending time with us, and we'll do it again next time.
Absolutely enjoyed it, my friend.
See you, brother.